Abraham Lincoln is one of those guys people can't stop talking about. Don't believe me? Here's a literal tower of Abraham Lincoln books. That's only 7,000 of the 15,000 books that we're aware of. And boom, that's your first useless fact. Let's move ahead to number 2. Abraham Lincoln is in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. Everybody knows that Abraham Lincoln is the tallest US president ever, but it also turns out he really liked wrestling. The style back then was called catch as catch can. Apparently no pins were involved, at least in some of the matches, and you were trying to throw your opponent onto the ground. Lincoln wasn't just good, he was really good at wrestling. He became a county champion when he was 21 years old. Over his 12 years of wrestling, he only lost one match out of 300. The only documented loss was to a man named Hank Thompson during the Black Hawk War. Apparently George Washington was also pretty good at wrestling, but according to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, they think that Abraham Lincoln would beat him. Lincoln was really good at making people laugh. He had an amazing memory for funny stories and jokes. But according to the people around him, it wasn't the stories or jokes themselves that were so funny. It was his delivery. His stories may be literally retold, every word and period and comma, but the real humor perished with Lincoln. He had the ability to draw crowds, so if he felt like it, there's a possibility he could have taken up a career a little bit more similar to Mark Twain as a humorist. In 1849, Abraham Lincoln became the first and only president to date to receive a patent. In fact, he was so early to get a patent that the number is 6469. This was for a device that could lift boats over shoals. Most people don't realize that Lincoln was all about mechanical devices. It was a hobby of his to spend free time looking at machines or farming equipment or anything mechanical to see how it worked. One of Lincoln's early jobs was working on a riverboat, which may be where he first saw an opportunity for a device like this. Now, because Lincoln loved inventions, he was also very hands-on when it came to the war. Lincoln would meet with inventors and go to cannon and rifle demonstrations. He even fired rifles on the White House lawn, right around where the National Mall sits right now. Next up, Lincoln was really into cats. One time, his wife Mary caught him feeding a cat with his fork. She wasn't very happy about this. So Lincoln said, "If the gold fork was good enough for former President James Buchanan, I think it's also good enough for Tabby." Let's move ahead to the next one. Unlike most presidents, Lincoln never graduated high school, let alone college. Aside from lessons given by traveling school teachers, which added up to about 1 year of education, he kind of just educated himself. Lincoln read every single book he could get his hands on. And not beginner-level simple books, he was reading some very technical stuff throughout his life. The rest of his education was basically real-world experience. He did a lot of strange, kind of unrelated jobs. He taught himself how to become a lawyer. He became a co-owner of a general store before selling his share. He joined the military and became a captain. He then became a postmaster and a county surveyor. This lifelong self-education came with pros and cons. Because he was so well-read and worked so many different kinds of jobs, he kept up high-level conversations with anybody that you threw at him. But at the same time, he would also fall into simple spelling errors that other people would learn in grade school. Now, this may come as a surprise, but Lincoln wasn't quite as tall as some of these photos make him look. When he's standing around these Union soldiers, he looks like an absolute giant. In 1860, he was 6 foot 4 inches, 180 pounds, and had the largest presidential shoe size of 14. So while 6 foot 4 inches is tall, it's not like he was tall enough to play as a center in the NBA. People were on average shorter back then, so he was about 40 pounds heavier and 7 inches taller than the average Civil War soldier. Theories to explain his height have popped up over the years. Maybe Lincoln suffered from Marfan syndrome. In fact, one of his descendants had it. There's also a blood test taken from his assassination, which may point to a genetic disorder. But so far, it's kind of inconclusive and we'll never know for sure. And then of course, there's also the boring answer, which may be true. He could have just been a tall guy. The next few stories we've got revolve around his assassin, John Wilkes Booth. Lincoln is the first president ever to be photographed at his inauguration. Camera technology was very new at this point, and somehow a history nerd noticed his eventual assassin, John Wilkes Booth, may have been in the upper part of this photo. It's kind of blurry, but people think it might be that man right there. It's a little bit creepy when you think about it. There are 2 things to know about John. The first is that he was a famous actor, and second, he was not very subtle in his hatred. During one play called The Marble Heart, Mr. Booth played the villain of the show. The thing that made this weird was that he would say all of his villainous lines while making direct eye contact with Lincoln from the stage. Someone was seeing the show with Lincoln at the time, and he said, "You know, it almost seems like he's reciting those lines directly to you." And Lincoln said, "He does talk very sharp at me, doesn't he?" But the thing is, Lincoln was kind of used to people hating him. In fact, in a drawer, he kept a file under the A section for assassination letters. And at times, Lincoln did have a thing where he tried to reach out to people that didn't really like him. So even though he knew that John Wilkes Booth probably didn't like him, he decided to invite him to the White House for a visit. But John was not having it and refused to come. It's kind of interesting to think about what would have happened if John Wilkes Booth had come to visit the White House. Would John have come to like him a little bit more, or would that just have cemented his hatred? But even after the salty looks and refusing to come to the White House, apparently Lincoln was still not put off from watching shows that Mr. Booth starred in. So one day, Lincoln went to go see a play called Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater. Now Lincoln did have a bodyguard with him, a man named John Parker. When the play's intermission came, John Parker left the theater and went to get a drink at a local bar. Coincidentally, this was the exact same bar that John Wilkes Booth was in, getting a drink, probably trying to psych himself up for the assassination about to happen. So another strange thing happened on Lincoln's last day. Hours before the assassination, Lincoln had a hand in creating the Secret Service. Somehow, 30% of all money in America was fake. This was a massive problem that needed to be solved as soon as possible. So what started as a commission to create recommendations evolved into the Secret Service that we know today. So how did they get that additional duty of protecting the president on top of stopping counterfeiters? It turns out that William McKinley getting assassinated was the last straw. People in the government finally decided that maybe, just maybe, a department should be in charge of making sure these presidents stop getting killed off. In a span of only 36 years, 3 presidents had been assassinated: Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley. And by the way, what's with all these Ohio presidents getting killed off? That's not right. So Lincoln was an immensely popular president after he died. What happened next literally makes no sense, but it happened. A group of robbers decided it would be a great idea to break into Lincoln's gravesite, steal his coffin, and demand $200,000 to give it back. That's about $2.7 million in today's money. The plan, while innovative, didn't stand a chance though. The Secret Service found out about it because somebody somewhere couldn't keep their mouths shut. They infiltrated the gang and shut it all down. Now, Lincoln's coffin has 10 feet of concrete over it, so this will never happen again. This next story happened around 1863 or 1864. It's a really strange coincidence involving Abraham Lincoln's oldest son Robert and John Wilkes Booth's brother Edwin. So here's the story. Robert Lincoln was waiting to buy a train ticket on a sleeper car from a conductor standing on a station platform. Apparently there was a line of people pressed up against each other on this platform. Robert Lincoln was waiting his turn and was pressed up against the train car. All of a sudden, the train started to move. This twisted him off his feet and he fell down in that gap between the platform and the train. This was pretty serious and there's a possibility he could have died. But before the train could run him over, someone grabbed him by his coat collar and dragged him up out of harm's way. This turned out to be the brother of John Wilkes Booth, Edwin. Robert immediately recognized him because Edwin Booth was also a famous actor just like his brother. In a couple years, when John would go on to assassinate the president, this horrified his brother Edwin. But he did mention to people that he could at least find some comfort in the fact that he saved Lincoln's son. A Booth would take a Lincoln life and save a Lincoln life. There's a sad kind of poetry in that. And that's the video. My name's Justin, hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know down in the comments below, and check out the channel for more videos.